Okay, it's good. All right, we're gonna go ahead and start. We just pick up. So I'll go back to this and let's do this. I don't know. Okay. All right. So we lost you guys, and well, I don't have a really good explanation as to what happened, but I will say that it wasn't me. I don't know what it was. Something's wrong with YouTube. Um, I don't get it. So basically, without like long story short, OBS and YouTube were not talking to each other very well for whatever reason. We weren't able to even like restart the stream because there's a start schedule stream button that you can check, and then you have to do that to start a stream up, or you could in many cases just start it again. But for some reason, it was no longer communicating with YouTube, and we just weren't getting that. So I don't know why that is, but that is what happened. So right now, I'm just sort of like getting things together here so that we can pick up from where we left off. And I apologize for the inconvenience, but thank you guys for being so patient and like hanging with us while we're dealing with these technical issues, whatever they might be. Because I mean, like, a lot of times when this stuff happens, I don't even know why this happens. So I think we're good. I just need to let me just prepare the next slide. So we were talking about the Gillette ad, and I think Hannah, were you saying something about this before we got cut off? I think you were the one talking about this last. So
Yeah, one of the things that I was going to mention, I actually I tweeted out about this. This was an opportunity if Gillette really cared about their sales and they really wanted to connect with men and follow what they say they've done in the past. They had an opportunity to connect with their customer base by celebrating male mentors, especially fathers, because it seems like that's sort of a roundabout way to the message that they were
mm-hmm.
trying to go for. But they obviously they ended up going the social justice route and shaming instead, and that's just it. They chose to alienate them with a preachy blame throwing ideology. This was probably the stupidest marketing campaign I've ever seen, and if it wasn't deliberately stupid, somebody at the company, well, heads need to roll.
Yeah.
But interestingly, they've been deleting comments, and I wonder if that person. Do you actually still have contact with the person whose comment was deleted?
No, I mean I did.
Okay.
I'm not the one that saw it. I heard about it. My wife Lindsay, she was reading them, and she found that there was like one really great comment that she was talking about that kept getting taken down, and then the guy would whoever posted it would go and repost it, and it would get removed
Post again.
again, and then they'd go back on and say my comment keeps disappearing, but here's what I originally had to say, and then it would get taken down again. So they're basically just doubling down on
Right.
this, and you know it's and oh, the thing I was gonna
Oh, I
say
know what I
is
was gonna say.
about this is that there it's in the write up, and also I believe on the no in the write up according to Forbes, they've been losing money. They've been dropping their market shares have dropped from 70% to 50, which is still like that's half of the whole market. But it's been going down, and Dollar Shave Club has been becoming more and more popular. It's been growing. So
Well,
I
that's
don't.
probably why they why they're deleting comments and everything. They think that they can actually control their consumer base.
Yeah, no, for sure, because they think that as Mike said, that they're basically the go to. And because they still have half the market share, they are the go to right now still, but it's shrinking. Now all it has
Mm.
to happen, honestly, is if Schick or Bic or Dollar Shave Club or any of these other sort of like competing companies, if they make an ad to counter this one, then it's over. That'll be the end. Like that. It
Yeah.
please, if you're listening, Dollar Shave Club, do it because
Well,
their products are not anti male at all. In fact, they're pretty like it's kind of like they're very comfortable with the fact that they know that they mainly market to men, even though they do make products for women as well. And so they make a lot of like male aimed, sub products. For example, if you get an order of,
they also sponsor a lot of people on our side of the fence, like Crowder.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
they
true.
do.
And
Well, yeah. In fact, I think the place I've seen the ads has been when I'm watching Tucker Carlson.
mm-hmm.
So
And
make
when you
faces at
get
people.
like when you get a Dollar Shave Club thing, they give you like little books to read. They're for the bathroom. It's just like jokey stuff. Like here's something to read while you're on the toilet, and
Like those
it's like
bathroom readers.
yeah, and they know that this is like stuff that men would at least get a kick out of if they wouldn't use it. It's very they're very aware of their customer base. So if they made an ad to counter this, that would be fantastic. So Dollar Shave Club, take notice. It's not just men that are mad at this ad; it's women
maybe
too.
we should get them involved with. See if we could get them involved with Movember too.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have a lot of guys do No Shave November, and then at the end of the month they make a big deal about finally shaving and everything. So that maybe we ought to reach out to them as a group and start hey,
Yeah.
since you sponsor these other things, and since Gillette screwed up, and you might be able to actually endear yourself to men even more now, why not sponsor a charity that helps with men's health conditions. One
There
of
you
the things
go.
I wanted to point out, companies like Gillette need to now that's a Freudian slip, and I'm not going to explain.
Mm-hmm.
But need to hear from customers when they screw up like this, or when they deliberately do something stupid like this. And if you just Google search contact Gillette, just the 2 words, contact Gillette. What I'm seeing on my screen, the first thing that comes up, Google puts their phone number front and center. It's the biggest thing on the screen, other than the little information thing on the side that shows what you can buy and what company they're with, and that they have profiles on Facebook and Twitter and all that stuff.
Yeah.
They have a customer service 800 number. And they have right below that, it says contact us Gillette, and it's their contact us number. And then under that is contact us Gillette on demand. And then below their FAQ that's under that is live chat support from Gillette experts. So you can actually contact them in a number of ways to tell them what you think, and of course, the most articulate terms that you can, so that they'll be inclined to listen, because they're not going to listen to a bunch of us call them up and cuss them out or something. But yeah, anybody that is really irate about this, or really wants the company to know that this is not the way to advertise to men, and that the objection isn't to the idea that men aren't perfect, as feminists are saying on Twitter, but to the fact that the ad was preachy and demonized men, wholesale, things like that. Uh, they probably need to hear that in
Yep.
order to maybe adjust their way of communicating. Because it's not necessarily bad for a company to want to celebrate what makes a particular group of people great. It's bad for a company to say, "You're not living up to this. Shame on you."
Mm-hmm.
That's not their business.
Yeah. Absolutely. And well, you guys, you know what to do with the market. To like, don't just let them know that this is displeasing, which I think they're gonna figure out if they lose more money. But just buy your stuff somewhere else. So, and also, someone mentioned that this is not streaming on Twitch anymore. The reason is because we weren't able to set up another stream on the restream, so normally where it goes out to all of the things. So we had to just make a new stream just on YouTube. So we're only on YouTube for this particular stream because of what happened. I hope that the sausage maker, the big streaming method, will work. It just didn't work when I was trying to set it up. Even Hannah wasn't able to do it on her end either. So I don't know if that's an issue with YouTube or what. So yeah, just come to Badger Livestream because that's where it is. Anyway, you guys should be subbed to this channel anyway. So So also, please give this stream a like and give it the like that you were gonna give it on the other one, but do it here.
Yeah.
So They Call Me Mags gives us $10 and says, "I get so few chances to catch these streams live because of all the work I have during the week. Thank you all for your hard work." Thank you. They Call Me Mags is very kind of you. All right, so we're gonna move on to the next story. This one is by Mike J. I hope that you guys are. This is a good one. I actually have a few things I want to say about this. So, Mike, if you could, we're going to talk about "Touch Me Not."
Certainly, Brian. So, director Adina Pintelli's latest film, Touch Me Not, centers around people who struggle with intimacy and blends together real and fictional stories. The film's main character, Laura, played by Laura Benson, finds physical intimacy impossible due to her repressed anger. Christian Baerler, I have a really hard time saying this name.
Baerlin? I see Bayer, like the Bayer, like the
it's
medicine.
Like Bayer,
in there.
but then like lean or Len.
Baerlin.
Baerlin. Just go with Baerlin. Plays himself in the film, and just as he is in real life, is partially paralyzed due to spinal muscular atrophy. Baerlin, while not an actor, was chosen by Pintilli herself after searching for those with unconventional sex lives. Baerlin warned Pintilli about possible negative attention her film might draw. Quote, "He told me I'm going to get attacked for exploiting people with disabilities. He said, look, people have their own preconceived notions about disability. They think we just need to be taken care of and that we have no sexual life. We have the same desires and the same rights to be sexual beings as anyone else." Touch Me Not won top honors at the 2018 Berlin Film Festival and is currently screening at the Museum of Modern Arts in New York.
Okay. So this at first glance might seem like, it's another, SJW movie about the disabled. But here's the thing that I think is interesting about this. And then maybe they don't quite touch on it, but there's a couple things that I just have to remark on right off the bat that I find interesting. Number one, Baerlin. Christian Baerlin is a man that has a muscular atrophy. He believes that the film does have some significance and it's worth making, and he wanted to be a part of it. But he also knew that what he warned her about, this is what's interesting, what he warned her about was that she was going to be attacked or criticized because she put disabled people in her movie and wanted to talk about disabled people, and that she would be criticized for exploiting them. And he did not see it that way. In fact, as a disabled person, he wanted to be a part of it because he liked the idea of the project. And I think that that's kind of, it's interesting because he has every sort of like, he's in a position to claim victimhood and perhaps use that as a bludgeon against her, but he doesn't. In fact, he warns her against the opposite. And I gotta say that I gotta give him credit for that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that this movie, I mean, I'm guessing because I haven't seen it myself, so maybe I should watch it myself but I'm gonna just put this out there. If it is about how people with disability struggle with intimacy, the struggle to find love with other people, and they struggle for acceptance most of all, it's interesting because this to me is a statement about incels. Because a lot of incels, and I would guess, I don't know quite if it's the majority, but I would guess that a lot of disabled people, men, are incels. And so this compassion for the disabled is accidentally, maybe whether they know it or not, it's spilling over into incel territory. So I wonder if the director of this film has considered, if they know about the dialogue around incels that basically attacks them because they can't get laid and they're kind of bitter about it, whatever, if they realize that this is actually, like what you're talking about here is you're giving compassion to men, I mean, and women as well, because I know there are women in the film that are disabled and looking to find love and looking for intimacy, even, and closeness with other people. And so I thought it was interesting because of the way that this is being discussed, when I think there's clear and obvious overlap between disabled folks and incel people. So anyway, those were the reasons why I picked the story.
Yeah, there are some things that happen that when you've got a disability that are really rough. People have this reaction, and I don't know. it's just I think it's just kind of a normal reaction to things you can't deal with, that are the human brain does this thing where it's like, well, I'm going to avoid that entirely. So you get somebody that has a condition that creates adversity in their life, and there is nothing you can do to make it better.
Yeah.
People have a tendency to um, sort of not spend time with the person that's got that situation, if they haven't gotten close to that person to the degree where they are able to ignore the disability. And this happens a lot with people with chronic pain too. Like, people have a tendency to not go to their house, not invite them to things, not go see them, because they know, you ask how they're doing, and they're going to say fine, but they're in pain. And there are things they can't do because they're in pain. This is the same thing with people who have a physical disability. There are things that they either can't do, or they can't do normally. They can't do the way you do them because they have this disability.
Mm-hmm.
And so people will just like pull away from them and draw away from them. There's a lot of isolation that happens because of that. And it's actually the rare good friend that will just come over and play video games with somebody who has a disability. And then, the other aspect of it is, you get really busy in your life, and if they can't necessarily participate in a lot of the things you do, you have to make separate time out of everything else you're doing if you want to hang out with this person. That may be one of the first things that gets dropped from your life. But then the other thing is that people tend to treat an individual that has a disability. They forget that people who have physical disabilities aren't necessarily also disabled intellectually in any way. I mean, there are people with intellectual disabilities, and there are people with intellectual disabilities that make them incompetent to consent, and that's a
Yeah.
whole different ballgame. That's when you're in a caregiving situation, for instance, and you are with an adult who is incompetent to consent. That adult still has a sex drive. They still have human instinct, and so you end up having to manage the individual's response to their own drives in such a way as to protect them from being exploited when they are not competent to consent. But that at the same time, it doesn't mean that they can't hang out with members of the sex they're attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
And contrary to the beliefs of a lot of people who oppose treating various sexualities as natural, there are people with intellectual disabilities or mental health conditions that you would, if they weren't natural, but that wouldn't manifest, that have various sexualities. So they may be attracted to the same sex, um, and they may even have specific ethnic attractions, believe it or not. And you all have all these things to deal with if you're in a caregiving situation, to where you know that some things are going to set people off that can't engage in behaviors that would you know pursue that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, in their social life, you're not you can't stop them, and shouldn't stop them from having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's the same. You deal with it the same way that you would deal with someone who is of the chronological age that their mental age is, essentially, in terms of chaperoning and things like that. So you have this whole complex area with people with disabilities, depending on whether it's a physical disability, a mental disability, or a combination of both, regarding their difficulty in achieving intimacy, and their difficulty in just maintaining platonic intimacy,
Yeah.
close friendships. And it can be very disheartening to the individual.
Mm-hmm.
So this film, I think this film is actually going to be something that everybody should watch. And whether they take a social justicey approach, which they might, or whether they take a practical approach to it, I think it's still going to make valid points regardless, and it's still going to be useful in being able to communicate. This is what happens to an individual when they are denied intimacy and
Mm-hmm.
denied human contact.
Yeah, I guess we'll have to see what the approach is that she decides to go with. I just, again, I'm fascinated by this because whether she knows it or not, this is if she's presenting male disabled men in a compassionate light when it comes to intimacy, she is in fact defending incels. And not only, as you said, not only men who are like, and not only men who are clearly physically disabled where you can see, but like there's people who are emotionally disabled or at least stunted and mentally disabled as well, which is less obvious. And I bet that that's even a more common issue with men as well as incels, because see, when you're physically disabled and you're turned down by a woman, and it could be a disabled woman too, because they can be picky as well. You might it'll be with some I would say compassion usually, because they can see. I mean, I'm being favorable here, but it's possible that somebody could see that. Oh well, he's really sweet, but he can't walk or whatever it is, right? But if someone is just like, if it's a guy and he's on the spectrum or he's autistic or whatever, whatever it is his issue is, right? And he has trouble communicating, or trouble sort of saying what he wants or being charismatic. He comes across a certain way. Then people are more likely to be less compassionate. The rejection can be a lot more hurtful. It can be, even outright, abusive, and they will be sort of mocked and treated like incels, like worthless virgins, losers, etc. But it's not often a fault of their own. And I'm not trying to, again, take away agency from men, because I know that there's plenty that do have it, but I'm talking about the cases in which these men struggle emotionally, psychologically, and physically. It's just sometimes the disabilities are visible and sometimes they are not. And so I wonder, and I hope, that what she does here is more compassionate towards men with disabilities. And you can see the trailer, which I don't want to show here, but if you look at the trailer, you can see that it does feature men mostly. So there is that. So I guess we'll see what it is. If you guys get a chance to watch the film, or if you're interested and you check it out, let us know in the comments if we're, what the tone is, and if you think we should look at it as well. So does anybody else have any thoughts on this story? Okay, so I'm gonna look at the super chats and then we'll move on to Ashley Judd. This is a good one. So Crawl Dragon gives us $5 and says, does this film discuss men who are missing their foreskins, or is that considered healthy and having a foreskin is not a disability? Or yeah, of course that doesn't count. So there are men that work in the business of fucking that don't have foreskins. So no, I don't think it counts for them. All right, so next story. Ashley Judd's sexual harassment claim against Weinstein, or is it Weinstein? I think it's Weinstein. Against Weinstein, dismissed.
Yeah, it's spelled Weinstein, but it's pronounced Weinstein, at least here.
Yeah. On January 9th, a federal judge dismissed actress Ashley Judd's sexual harassment claim against movie producer Harvey Weinstein. Judd can proceed with a defamation claim in the civil lawsuit in which she accused Weinstein of defaming her in 1998 when she refused his sexual advances. According to Judd, Weinstein had discouraged director Peter Jackson from casting her in Lord of the Rings. Weinstein is to stand trial in May in New York on 5 charges, including rape, involving 2 other women. Weinstein has denied all accusations of sexual assault, saying that any sexual encounters were consensual. And I am actually becoming more and more inclined to believe that. So,
can we just take a moment to imagine if Ashley Judd was actually in Lord of the Rings?
No.
I did.
No, we can't.
I did imagine. It was
No.
I think she was trying to get Liv Tyler's part, but I don't know for sure. I think she was trying to be the elf chick, so
I'm pretty sure she was that orc that almost got hit by the boulder. The one with the weird thing on his face.
Okay, I can picture that.
Just picture her doing that speech. I'm a nasty elf woman. We do not get to choose. Use Windy Orcs attack.
Oh. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
So she had so her sexual harassment claim had something to do with Weinstein defaming her when she refused his sexual advances. So basically, she's saying that because supposedly she thinks that Weinstein suggested that Peter Jackson not hire her for Lord of the Rings, and that must be because she turned him down when he asked her for sex.
See, this is why I have a lot of doubt when it comes to the supposed epidemic of sexual harassment in the workplace.
I also press X
This
to
is-
doubt. I think the rest of you guys should too.
Yeah, this is one of those things, there's a particular logic fallacy associated with this, and I can't think of what it's called, but it's when one thing happens after another thing, you attribute the first thing as the cause of the second thing, and it might not be. And I think
ad
that's
hoc, ergo propter hoc.
yes, that's it. That's it. Which always sounds to me like it's being it's a discussion of a loogie. But anyway, yeah, it's this. I don't think if Weinstein actually did this, I don't think it has anything to do with sex. I think it has everything to do with the fact that she just wasn't right for any of the roles in that film.
And she's not.
And
I mean,
I
the
think
trees
a lot of
are all
women do
CG,
that.
so I don't know.
Well, I think a lot of women do that, though. They attribute things that they fail at or things that they don't get to this person didn't get what they wanted from me, and this is revenge. It's malicious.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like that's why I keep hemming and hawing over, I don't know for sure what happened with my Twitter account when I keep talking about, my Twitter account having been locked earlier today. It happened after a couple of things, but I can't honestly say I know for a fact which thing was the trigger for it, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the way you should look at any situation like that. Did I not get the promotion because the other person was more qualified? Did I not get the role because I don't have the range in my acting capabilities that maybe this other person has, or I don't have the physical features this other person has? And I couldn't see her as if Arwen was the role that they were she was
It
going.
was,
No, I would have
maybe.
been very
So,
upset to see
there-
her in that.
Yeah, I have the the Lord of the Rings super mega bundle package with the fucking boxes and the extended version, and you can look at there's multiple behind the scenes things. So I follow this stuff pretty closely. Peter Jackson was supposedly warned. He says that Weinstein warned him that Ashley Judd is very difficult to work with. And so this is, I think, the reason. Oh, I bet she is.
Yeah.
I mean,
She
like
says
the only
she's a
person,
nasty woman.
the only person that might be worse than her is probably Rose McGowan. But yeah, so that's he probably made the decision to work with Liv Tyler, or what's her name that played the other elf chick. I would, because the other woman, I can't remember her name. It's like Claire something or other. She was Hela in the Thor movie. She's a really good actress, so I don't think that Judd could compete. Liv Tyler she's just really good at crying a lot, which is basically what she does in all the movies. I don't know if you noticed, but she talks she's good at
she's
crying.
also very beautiful, and she has an elfin kind of face and elfin features.
Yeah, she passes.
She looks like
her
I
father.
Kind of imagine Arwen to look.
She does
looks like
actually.
Who would have thought Steven Tyler would make a pretty girl? But
young
the other
Steven
thing
Tyler,
I noticed with this kind of story is, you ever notice when you hear about someone
Kate
in
Blanchett.
Hollywood just being an absolute prima donna and hard to work with and shit, it's almost always a woman. It's not. It's almost never a guy. I kind of wonder why that is, And I'm sure there's a lot of women out there going, it's because women get sexually harassed and men don't. But I think it might actually be because women are a little more entitled in terms of, I deserve this kind of treatment. in
Yeah.
the workplace.
I
And
honestly,
men don't have that attitude.
yeah, I honestly believe that there is. So I want to just make this clear. In my opinion, I do believe that there are instances of sexual
Oh
improprieties
yeah,
going on in Hollywood, like stuff that shouldn't
yes.
be happening, definitely happening, right? Pedophilia, definitely happening. People getting like, into situations in over their head, being manipulated by powerful people and so on. Absolutely, it's happening. But the problem is people who are just looking to use Me Too as a bludgeon against their enemies, or to like try to get
Also,
money out of
then
them or ruin their careers or ensure that they're in the spotlight or get attention or get sympathy or whatever, they are muddying the waters to the point where people just don't care about Hollywood's problems with Me Too. There's just no, they don't care, and it's like the boy cried wolf, right, on steroids. Like it's the mob that cried wolf. And the Harvey Weinstein stuff, they should have been very careful, because yeah, this worked on Bill Cosby. It worked on him. And I think it's unfortunate. I think that he was railroaded. The judge was essentially railroaded to give him a prison sentence. But I think that Weinstein is going to fight it, and I think he should, because I would imagine that most, if not all, of these will likely get thrown out, and he won't serve any time, because they were probably consensual, and they just agreed to do something with him that maybe they shouldn't have, and they regretted it afterwards, and now they have to essentially like reap what they sow. And I don't have a lot of sympathy if you agreed to do it. So that's what I think anyway.
yeah, I think for every genuine accusation that's actually backed by fact, where somebody actually did
Mm-hmm.
something they shouldn't have done to another person, I think there are several that somebody had that interpretation. A happened and then B happened, therefore A caused B. Or if I just accuse this guy of this, I can get what I want, or like some of them are mistaken like that, some of them are malicious, some of them are due to oversensitivity, and some of them are real. But I think the
Yeah.
real ones are actually the minority of the group.
There you go. All right, so I got one more super chat, and then we'll go on to the next story. So Starkey Farrell gives us £5 and says, "I wonder how many women do that because they have an external locus of self." That's a good question. Well, I mean, you guys want to say anything to that? Nobody?
All right, I do not know the term external locus of self, so I don't know what that means. So I can't. Otherwise, I would respond to it.
I'll tell you in a second.
It's,
Locus
it's
of
when
control.
it's when you attribute sort of what goes wrong or in your life to something outside yourself, rather than blaming yourself for everything. Like
Oh well.
an extreme internal locus of control would be blaming yourself for everything beyond reason. So an extreme external locus of control would be blaming everyone else for your problems, even when it's obviously not the case. That sort of thing.
In that case, I would say women are largely raised to have an external locus of self in relation to things going wrong. And I would
Mm-hmm.
say that
And
there's a
an
bit of a
internal
handicap that
one,
comes from that.
for things going right.
Yeah, everything that goes well, you get credit for. Everything that goes wrong is somebody else's fault. You didn't get pregnant because you were dumb and screwed around. It was the knock-up fairy, right? It was that guy's fault that had sex with you, even though you had sex with him too. And it's if you don't get that role, it's not because maybe you're not the right person for the role. It's not because you're hard to work with. It's not because your acting skill isn't up to par. It's because you didn't have sex with that guy and he's mad now. That makes very much sense. And it is like there's so much of an external locus of control now that I know it that term uh is the term for something I've been talking about, Lau. It's kind of one of the causes of the accountability gap, I'd say. It's the
Mm-hmm.
reason why women get offended when you talk about the idea of men having reproductive rights,
Yeah.
and suggest that men should have the right to not be saddled with child support. if a woman chooses to become a single mom with custody of a child that the father didn't want.
It's the reason why ads like Gillette exists. Meanwhile,
Yeah.
ads targeting women praise them just for existing, while also
Yeah,
claiming that anything that they're not doing well is their fault, is not their fault, rather.
it's the reason why feminists actually argue in all seriousness that if we don't have a lot of women in the areas of medicine and science and technology and stuff like that, it's not because they don't have the attitude or aptitude. It's because some external factor is stopping them.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's a good statement, Starkey Farrell. There's probably a lot of truth to it. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the next story. Oh, this is Mike J again. It's a short one because there's more to it, but we don't have all the datas, so don't don't hold us. Don't get too mad at us for it. So go ahead, Mike. We're talking about Spain.
Yeah, so this I'm just gonna before this say a lot of this information comes from Kotaku in Action on Reddit, specifically the user Kukurio, who is one of their very active artists there. He does a lot of Vivian James fan art. He's got his own website.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like a pretty cool guy. Go give him a check out. And he's got a much longer, more in-depth article, although it was made about 3 years ago. And of course, things have changed. So I'm just giving a really small snippet of what happened in 2016, and then the update what happened now. Unfortunately, a lot of this was in Spanish and no hablo Mexican, so kind of doing the best we can with it. But this does seem like something that is important that we definitely do need to talk about. That being said, one-sided gender violence laws enacted by Spanish courts have recently been ramped up. In 2013, Spain's government, which was socialist at the time, don't know if it still is or not, enacted a new law called the Integrated Protection Measures Against Gender Violence. The main thrust of this law was that domestic violence and gender violence were two separate crimes, with gender violence being motivated by sexism and carrying a higher sentence. The twist was that gender violence could only be committed by men.
Oof.
Fast forward to current year 2019, and in Spain's Supreme Court they've changed things up yet again. Now, any instance of male violence against a woman, even self-defense, is seen as gender violence. So in essence, Spain's Supreme Court has ruled that all men are sexist by default.
That is crazy.
Well,
Get out of Spain. Get out now if you can.
It sounds like they haven't just ruled that all men are sexist by default, but that men don't have any right to bodily autonomy. So if somebody wants to hurt you and that person happens to be female, you have to let her or you're sexist. You have to let her or you're engaging in gender-based violence. That's unless there's something we're missing from that. That's what I'm getting from that change.
Wow. So
I wonder how long that's going to last.
This is like basically a slippery slope in action. Like this is what it looks like. That's crazy. Get out of the country. And somebody in the comments said that Spain is a monarchy. They could be a monarchy, but also still have like a socialist parliament or something. But I don't know if they do today. They did at the time, according to Kukurio, who lives in Spain. He's the guy who wrote this up.
I think Norway still has a monarchy, and they're about as far left as you can go, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess
well, the
those
monarchy
things
itself can be leftist.
Yeah, exactly.
Like the UK is pretty fucking left-leaning at the moment, if I'm honest, and we're still a monarchy.
Yeah, someone said Spain has a Marxist government. So did they just bring back the Spanish Inquisition? Is that what this is?
Essentially, yeah.
When I said socialist government, like I'm not even joking. That's like the name of the party. It's like the National Spanish Socialist Workers or something like that.
Whoa.
They're
It's
national
National Socialists?
They are National
Okay.
Socialists.
Maybe that was
Oh,
a slip.
gosh.
Hold on.
Well,
It's PSOE.
wouldn't be surprising.
Spanish, not nationalist. Spanish Socialist Workers Party. My Spanish is rusty, but I'll give this a shot. Partido Socialista Obrero Español.
I don't know.
Okay, because I know that was one of the ironies when looking at what happened to Count Dankula. If I remember right, the Scottish government is a national socialist government, isn't it?
It's the Scottish National Party. They're
Okay,
not
okay.
They're not officially.
They're
socialist,
not officially socialist.
but
They're
they are very much socialists.
yeah,
Yeah.
they're socialists that
Just
call
not in
themselves
name,
national, but
that's
they
all.
don't call themselves national socialists.
Yeah. So it's illegal to be a man and even defend yourself against a woman, or they consider it gendered violence. And when women attack men, it doesn't. It's just assault, I guess, or it's
So
just
in Spain,
violence.
you can get arrested and jailed now for surviving while male.
Well, I mean, I guess the one thing though is that in Spain they gave it a name. They're actually telling you that if you're a man and you defend yourself against a woman, you are committing a crime, even though she is also committing a crime, but your crime is probably more severe because it's gendered violence. In the United
Isn't
States,
it Spain, or at least a part of Spain where femicide is now a thing? That's
Yeah.
when they're first testing out this
That happened a while ago.
reclassification.
yeah,
Oh,
yep. But what I was gonna say is that I don't really see that much of a difference between. There probably isn't as much of a difference between Spain and the U.S. right now, even though Spain has given that a name and they've identified it as a thing that they're telling their people openly, this is how we operate. In the U.S., we have this thing where we pretend like we have domestic violence laws, but we still arrest men for defending themselves. It's called the Duluth model, and it actually operates under the same assumptions. Instances of domestic violence. The only difference is that, and it's probably not really the case, if you are out in, according to what Spain has recently done, if you are out in public and a random woman that's like on fucking bath salts decides to attack you and you defend yourself and you end up knocking her out and it goes like viral on, iPhones because everyone's got phones now, you could be arrested for gendered violence even though she came at you, and she could do more damage, with retard strength or something, right? And then we would call that gendered violence.
And the title of the viral video would be "Man on Flacker Attacked Innocent Woman."
Yeah, exactly. But in the U.S.,
before you go there,
okay,
I have this friend.
Go ahead.
Oh shit. Okay, so he was at a buddy's house, and the buddy had friends over. This was not all that long after the Violence Against Women Act passed. This has been years ago. This guy is an EMT. He is an upstanding guy. He doesn't look clean cut necessarily, but he is an upstanding guy. He helps people for a living, right? His whole career is about providing care for people in serious distress. But this woman goes into the bathroom, comes out, and she looks completely messed up, and she starts getting violent. And she confronted him, and she went after him with a pencil, and she tried to stab him in the throat with it twice. Mm-hmm. The second time she tried to stab him in the throat, and he went to defend himself, he hit fight or flight instinct, and he popped her in the jaw. He's convicted of assault for that. After the woman came out of the restroom messed up on something or another, and attacked him. This wasn't someone he knew. Mm-hmm. It wasn't on the street, but it wasn't someone he knew. It wasn't someone he was friends with. He wasn't in a relationship with her, and he did not start the conflict. She did. So there's your comparison.
That's what I was gonna say. I wasn't gonna give an example, but I was gonna say that even though in Spain they called it something, over here they'd probably do the same thing anyways. There was a friend of mine that he used to be my boss. This was years ago before I started doing HBR, and I worked in an art supply store, and he was the store manager. I was the assistant manager. And shortly after I left there to go back to art school, I still stayed in contact with him. And he had this story of he was on a train. So we have these trains that go from the city to the suburbs. They're called metro trains, and they're usually like long rides that are pretty quiet. You know, not a lot of people on them at certain times of the day. People mostly use it for their daily commute to work and back. And he was on a train at night, and it was just him, and there were these girls, and he was there with his wife at the time. And he had this portable DVD player, and they were trying to watch a movie, and him and his wife had like earbuds in, and they were watching something on DVD. And these girls, like they're probably in their early 20s or late teens, I think they were in their early 20s, they sat like in front of him, and they started like acting really loud and obnoxious and making a lot of noise, and and being like just being a disturbance, because normally on these trains you're expected to kind of be quiet and stuff, but it was mostly empty except for him and his wife. And he asked them, he said, "Can you guys please keep it down? Like we're trying to watch this thing quietly over here, right?" And they started like calling him names and be essentially trolling him, aggressing at him, talking shit, that kind of thing. And then at one point, he got really frustrated, and he's like, "Can you please?" He didn't yell, but he said, "Could you please shut the fuck up? And or if you want to like be assholes, could you just go to a different part of the train, somewhere else?" And what these girls did was they went to another car, told a couple of dudes over there that there was a guy there that was harassing them sexually, and then these guys came in and kicked the shit out of my friend on the train. And then the train like conductors or whatever, the guys that are like take the tickets, they go over and they call the police, they pull the train over, and my friend gets arrested. And those guys, they get a slap on the wrist and they're sent away, because the idea is these girls told the story. He said he didn't even know where it came from, and he's the one who gets arrested. He spends a night in jail. And he had like even though he's like, this came out of nowhere, and I mean they beat the shit out of him. Like he was bleeding, his face. They fucked him up. Like they actually believed that these girls were telling the truth, and the cops believed it too. And this happened. This is like he was amazed. He couldn't believe that had happened. And I'll never forget it, because it was like right around the time that I was starting to get into this stuff, and I was like, holy shit! Like they didn't even take your side of the story. It's like, no, they just arrested me. So, this is like, and this is what women do. I mean, they can. I'm not saying that like all women do this. I'm saying that they can do this, and men and people in authority and the government that will side with them. And so it's no surprise that Spain is doing something that essentially would make all that legal for women.
Yeah, it's really this is so standard in history that if you look at you'll see it in old stories, you'll see it in like the classic stories, you'll see it in Bible stories, you'll see it in old television shows. There will be examples of exactly this kind of. In fact, this goes into like religious beliefs and everything, but a lot of people think that there is like one of the 10 commandments is thou shalt not lie. It's not. That is not a commandment. Thou shalt not lie is not one of the 10 commandments. Thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor is. And there's a little bit of a difference there. It's my birthday today is a lie. Today is not my birthday, right? But if I start telling people today is my birthday, I'm not bearing false witness against my neighbor. If I tell people that the guy across the street did something to me, I am bearing false witness against my neighbor. So the difference, it becomes significant when you think about what it is. And it's so significant that there had to be religious doctrine telling people not to accept that behavior.
Yeah.
Whereas there didn't necessarily have to be religious doctrine telling people not to accept just the fact that people lie. Like lying is stupid, and lying is behavior that people shouldn't engage in anyway. It's a rotten thing to do. It makes you not trustworthy and all that other stuff.
Unless it's taquilla. Taquilla is the good kind of lie. Don't be Islamophobic.
Taquilla sounds like you know, the drink that you're continuing to consume after you've had enough to affect your pronunciation.
It sounds like
It's when you-
a really small taco, like an appetizer
Yeah, there you
size. It's tequila night.
I
What are
would
you
never
drinking?
drink.
Yeah.
I would never drink tequila. I categorically do never drink tequila.
There we go. So it's not a
And that's
tequila
not a lie.
sunrise over there. Yeah, there we go. But yeah, it's a much bigger deal in society when someone does that, because you're betraying the trust of society. You're having negative impact on people, and obviously, society's protective strength towards its citizens is a resource, and you're abusing that resource. Women have a tendency to get away with abusing that resource. Very rarely do men ever get away with abusing that resource. So you look at another religion, and this is one that pisses people off every time it's mentioned. But um, yeah, under Islamic law, under Sharia law, women, because they are socially able to get away with abusing that resource, have a failsafe against them in the legal system, where they can't, their testimony by itself isn't enough for anything. They have to have, what, 4 witnesses, because of the tendency of people to just believe women. uh, that leads to false accusations, false convictions, consequences being visited on people who did nothing, society's resources being wasted protecting someone who doesn't need protected, and so on. So that ability to abuse those resources to get away with bearing false witness against one's neighbor, um, that that actually has that is the reason why they have to have 4 witnesses. That actually is needed, I suppose, in a
Mm-hmm.
society like that. And it's a result of what happens when you recognize your society is gynocentric, and you try to, rather than getting rid of the gynocentrism, you try to take measures to mitigate the consequences of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's the idea of women being able to get away with that in society, of lying about something, claiming they did something they didn't do, versus men not even being able to defend themselves. It's not surprising that this is going on in Spain, where a man can't physically defend himself against a woman because he can't accuse her,
Yeah.
whereas she can accuse him whether he did something or not.
Yeah. There you go. So I mean, Spain gave it a name, but it's not. It's not really that much different from everywhere else anyway.
Right.
So, sorry to hear that, Cuckoo Ryu. Let's look at some super chats. Spence Fencer gives us $5 and says suicide rates in Japan have more than, or in Spain, sorry, suicide rates in Japan. It's just like my brain just went there because they have a problem with that. Suicide rates in Spain have more than doubled since they invented gender violence laws. Tens of thousands of men dead already for gender equality. That was $5. Thank you, Spence Fencer. Chris Stewart gives us $10, and he's doing a 3-parter, so I guess I'll just wait for part 2 and 3 to come out before I read the rest. But gives us $10 and says, "Hey Hannah, I recently made a bit of a public fool of myself and oversimplified tradcon positions to the point of strawmanning. A real open mouth insert boot moment there." Okay. Yeah.
Well, I will say this:
Mm-hmm.
many people do that, including neo-tradcons, who strawman the shit out of what traditionalism actually is
Mm-hmm.
and what traditional values actually are. So we'll see what the position was that you stated, because you might have stated a neo-tradcon position and called it a tradcon position. We'll see.
Yeah. There you go. Okay, so we're gonna move on to the last story. And you know what? We're not that bad on time considering all of the technical problems. So thanks for hanging there with us. So this one, I love this story. So demand is high for DIY paternity tests. Alpha Biolabs sounds like something out of a comic book, but it's a real company. A company that does things such as DNA testing, drug testing, and alcohol testing, sells a DNA kit that can be used by individuals wanting to confirm paternity, so basically for men. Alpha Biolab says that up to 30,000 paternity tests are being performed in the UK each year, and that the number of tests being performed will increase by 10% year after year. So every year it seems like it's increasing by 10%. David Thomas, the company's director, says that of these, around 20% of men will learn that they are not the father of the child that they are testing. These testing kits sell for about 99 British pounds sterling, about $127 US, and are advertised and at guaranteeing 100% accuracy with next day results. All that is required is a cheek swab from the parent and from the child, which are then sent to the company to analyze. In the UK, as long as the individual either has parental responsibility or is listed on the child's birth certificate, the individual can perform the test without permission from the other parent or child. In some US states, there have been bans on DIY home DNA testing kits, with the only way to obtain a paternity test through a doctor's order or even a court order in some cases. Laura House, a genetic genealogist, warns that, quote, there is a profound shortage of trained counselors who can help people deal with what can be a devastatingly shocking discovery. People now get life-changing results via email while sitting alone in their sofa, and they are often totally unprepared to navigate the fallout, end quote. Mr. Thomas also stated that, quote, sometimes men will be delighted to learn that they are not the father, usually when a woman with whom they have been having a casual relationship tells him he has fathered a baby and he can prove otherwise. In other cases, it's the mother who's ordered the test to shut the father up.
I'm surprised this hasn't happened sooner. Like, women have a very good reason to complain about DIY tests like this, because it's the only thing that breaks through the power they've always had to know who their children are when the father does not. Yet it happened a lot of times this Christmas, families, like someone got everyone a swab test, and suddenly the mother gets very, very uppity and says, no, don't do that, those things are bad for you and they're all wrong. And at that point it becomes obvious, oh shit, my dad ain't my dad. Oh, that's what's going on, isn't it? And
Yeah.
God knows how many millions of lying whores there are out there.
Yeah.
whose interest it is to keep these out of the hands of the people, of poor people who can now afford it.
My question is, where did they get that statistic? Around 20% of men will learn they are not the father of the child they're testing.
It has to have come from testing that's already been done. In about 20% of cases, they must be obtaining a result that indicates that the individual tested is not the father of the child.
That just
Remember,
seems
though,
crazy high.
no. Well, wait a minute, though. You have to remember that this is 20% of the people that bought a test. So that means
Yeah,
that
so that's
it's
people who were
20%
already
of men who
suspicious.
are already suspicious that it might not be
that
their
makes
kid.
it a little better, I
Yeah.
guess. But
well,
damn, UK,
and of
what's
course,
going on there?
the feminist take on this would be, see, 80% of men who think that their wives are cuckolding them are wrong.
Yeah.
But yeah, if 20% is too high to be right, and it's like that's insane that there are that many women engaging that behavior, and that men are right about it that often. But the other end of this, if you get a do-it-yourself test, an over-the-counter type of test, and you get a result from it, and it's a result that's going to change the structure of your life, my personal recommendation is to get a more professionally done test before you take any action, just to be sure. I do not know about the over-the-counter paternity tests, whether they have the same problem or not, but like a lot of the drugstore DNA testing and stuff, I don't know if this has changed, because my encounter with this was like 10 years ago, but sometimes the results of those tests are questionable, not accurate. So definitely don't let that keep you from, if you have a suspicion, something that you need to find out, from getting it tested, trying it out. But getting like a false, I guess you could say a false mismatch, a false positive of that you're not the father, that's not out of the realm of possibility, and definitely should be redone with a more professional setting to be confirmed before, initiating a divorce or anything like that, because you definitely don't want to go through that if that's not the case, and you definitely don't want to lose contact with your real child because a drugstore test said that you're not the father. And then the other end of it is, if you're like 90% sure that you're not the father and the test comes back and says you are, it doesn't hurt to get a professional test done in that setting either.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think it's great. It's like Mike said. This is like the only thing that a guy has against like wrongful paternity. And if you're not sure, if if you don't want to get trapped, this might be the only way. Now, there is one problem. Apparently, in the U.S., there are some laws that prevent insert. I guess it depends on the state. Yeah, it's the state. Depends on the state that you're in. It has to be through a doctor's order, or worse, a court order. And I'm sure that getting a court order probably isn't easy. So there is a challenge there. I mean, we certainly want to.
Easy solution for that.
Go
Me and the
ahead.
kid are gonna take a little trip over to the UK for the weekend.
Well, it wouldn't be admissible in court if you were trying to get out of child support and stuff like that. But an easy way to get a woman to tell you if a child is not your kid, go for custody.
Yeah.
And file a case for custody, and if that's not your biological child, she'll admit it right away. Oh no, that's not actually your son. You can't have custody. That's not actually your daughter.
Give up your highfalutin job at the bank and go work at a soup kitchen or something. And suddenly, you'll find out it's not your kid.
Yeah.
That's yeah, there it is. It's either that or try to get on Maury Povich so you don't have to pay for it. But I think that yeah, I mean, I'm glad. I think it's really interesting that there is this uptick. There's a 10% every year. It's gone up in terms of sales in the UK specifically, but I think that if we could do it in the US, we'd probably see some spikes there as well.
Well, it indicates that more and more men annually are becoming aware of the probability. And I think there's another thing, at least in the United States. I don't know what the statistics are in the UK, but I know in the United States that the majority now of children living with single moms were born out of wedlock, and the majority of women who had children out of wedlock got pregnant out of wedlock on purpose because they wanted to be single mothers. So we're looking at a society now where there is a lifestyle of getting pregnant out of wedlock and raising the child in a single mother household that has the legal power. I don't want to use the term right, because I don't think it's a right in that situation. It's a power that has
Yeah.
the legal power to command the income of the father, to extort the father for money, even though he's not part of the child's life, or at least he doesn't live with the child. Um, she has the legal power if like she has had sex with a guy and he didn't file for the putative father registry. Like in Ohio, there's a really short period of time during which you have the option to sign up for that putative father registry and protect your paternal rights as the father of the child if you want to be a father. And so she has the power to unilaterally put the man in this situation where he has parental responsibility and no parental rights. And then, she's collecting money from him, she's collecting money from the state, and she's raising the child in the worst possible environment. So,
Yep.
guys, this is the situation. And it's not necessarily admissible in court. And a lot of times, if you just get a drugstore test, you have to get something official then And even proving that you're the biological father of a child might not give you custody rights if you weren't properly registered. And proving you're not the biological father of a child might not get you out of child support if you have been fooled by the mother into acting as the biological father of the child for years. So
Mm-hmm.
this is all like men get the short end of this stick all around. And the only way to change that is to start pushing for legal reform.
Yep. That's what we need to do for sure. Okay. Anybody else got any comments on this story or any of the other stories? Nope. Okay, I'm gonna go through the super chats, and then we'll go ahead and introduce the after show once again, and then we'll go into the after show. So, let's see where we left off here. Chris Stewart gives us, this is part 2 of his thread. I said that TradCon completely condemned men and women sharing interests in totality, when I should have said that I've noticed a rise in suspicion of the sincerity of women with male interests and vice versa by TradCons. I was trying to say that the way feminists try to put women with male hobbies on pedestals, in the case gamers, after they were taken off said after they were taken off said pedestal, probably led to a rise in that suspicion. Okay, so and he gave us $20 for the first part and 10 more for the second part. So thank you, Chris Stewart, for the donations. And yeah, so that's what you did. I would just say in brief, I think it's very important when you're talking to somebody to try to represent their positions as fairly as possible before you make your case against them. Because if you strawman someone or you misrepresent them, you're not really talking to the person you're talking to. Try to find out what the position of the person is and try to represent that as fairly as possible, is what I would suggest.
I think the super chat was about comments that were made during HBR. But the funny thing is, neo-tradcons I have noticed they do tend to get black and white about things that were not black and white traditionally. So traditionally there is an expectation that women will be ladies and men will be gentlemen, women will be feminine and men will be masculine. But there's also a respect for feminine strength and masculine nurturing, feminine toughness and masculine social bonding. So those are things that, like, they're not eliminated. And I noticed that sometimes when you're talking to a neo-tradcon, it can look like they took traditional conservatism and made a caricature of it and decided to live by that. Then so they're like stereotyping and then trying to be the stereo. It's much like people who imitate white people who imitated black rappers in the 80s, in the 90s, and they imitated all of the things that were negative stereotypes of black rappers, and nothing that actually was cool about the genre of music or the people that were involved in its creation. And I like, so I've seen that and I can see where that straw man might have come from.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's definitely not tradition that in fact, the joke is back when the men were men and so were the women. Traditionally, women were a lot tougher and a lot stronger and a lot more rational and wise and had much more common sense before they could be called a woman instead of a little girl. And today, like,
Whoa.
the women of history would look at the women
Whoa.
of today and just be appalled and call us all wimps. And so yeah, that's the big difference there. But it doesn't necessarily mean your straw man was malicious. I think it probably was just misguided.
Yeah, fair enough. Crawl Dragon gives us $2 and says, I bet Jeremy Kyle is kicking himself right now. I don't know who Jerry
He's
Mikhail is.
he's the British Jerry Springer, basically.
Oh, I see. Because of the
Oh.
paternity test thing. Aha. Chris Stewart, he gives us another super chat and writes 2 questions. Are traps gay? Is lollies high art? I answered these yesterday on a stream. I'm not going to answer them again. So,
well, traps are as gay as a piece of string. Everyone knows that. And as for lollies being high art, if you ever go in an anthropology museum, you see a hell of a lot of statues of naked children. So you never know what's going to become high art.
Well, it depends. I guess whether or not they're high art depends on what you were on when you created the artwork. Like, did you smoke anything first? Did you,
right.
snort
Sure.
anything first? You might have been high, but yeah.
I picked the wrong time of the week to start sniffing glue. All right, so Leaf Maleef gives us 20 knocks or kronas, and says demand a NIPT test during pregnancy, father's DNA. Okay.
I advocate against any kind of testing that requires the God, I can't think of the term now. That basically don't puncture anything that's protecting the baby if you don't have to. Don't take the risk of introducing bacteria in there if you don't have to. That's dangerous to the baby. And you can do testing after the birth, and it's not so dangerous to the baby. So please don't put your child at risk because you're suspicious of her mother or his mother. That's counterproductive. And chances are, you're not going to learn anything that you couldn't have learned after the birth. But you definitely don't want to be doing that kind of thing if you don't have to. I wouldn't even, if you don't have a good reason. Yes, the amniotic sac is what I was trying to think of, a Danish guy. That's correct. But if you don't have a good reason to do some sort of testing, like if you don't suspect a disability that you have to do something about, or it's going to hurt the child, that has to be addressed before birth, or you have to be specifically prepared for at birth and things like that. Don't puncture the amniotic sac, because that creates a risk.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just my thinking on it.
Someone said, Starkey Farrell says at Badger Livestreams, the NIPT test is done on the mother's blood, not on amniotic fluid.
Okay, that's good.
So,
I have never heard of this test before. So, but what on earth does it test if it's done on the mother's blood?
I don't know.
Like, how can you? That's interesting. If you can
Good to
find out
know.
information about the baby from the mother's blood, that actually explains a lot about the process of pregnancy. The changes, some of the changes the mother goes through. If there's chemicals in the mother's blood and cells in the mother's blood that would provide that kind of information, and that means that the baby has a huge impact on the mother's body. That's neat, actually.
Yeah. So Leaf Maleef gives another 20 kronas and says NIPT is a blood test of the mother. So
Yeah,
there
well,
you
in
go.
that case, then there shouldn't be any reason not to.
Yeah.
Like, there's actually a barrier between the mother's blood and the baby's blood, and there are cases where women who have diseases like AIDS and hepatitis give birth to babies that are not infected.
Mm-hmm.
So there's obviously some transference there too, but it's interesting. They did not do that when I was pregnant. I don't know if the test is something that came along afterwards, or if it was because of my insurance,
They're
what
saying
type of insurance I had.
they're saying that they can get the DNA sample from the baby because the mother
It
shares
comes from
some
through the
of
placenta.
through the placenta, right? So that's how it works. There you go. It's great stuff. So yeah, that's how it works, and that's pretty cool. But with that said, we are going to go into the after show. So let me show you guys what we're going to be talking about real quick. This is an Upworthy article called "An Open Letter to Men Who Will Have Sex with Me But Won't Date Me." Boo hoo. many years before I got together with my current boyfriend, I had a sex thing with this guy that I thought was relationship material. But, and it's a big butt. I mean, it's a really big butt, guys. It really is. We're going to go into
It's
this.
relationship material.
Big surprise that kind of woman
Yes.
would come with a really big butt.
She's a big, do you see this? She's a big woman. And I think that this is like about, that's a picture of her right there. And I think that might be really flattering. It might be somebody else. So we're going to go ahead and read this article in the after show. I want to thank you guys for coming. I see another super chat, so I may as well go ahead and give that one a read. Chris Stewart says, for $5, one recent dumb trend I've been seeing are people shaming anyone who dates single parents because, quote, you're raising someone else's child, end quote.
Yeah, that's the one that pisses me off. I have a problem with people shaming someone for not raising someone else's child. How dare you shame someone for not raising someone else's child? But holy fuck, how dare you shame someone for being altruistic and loving too?
Mm-hmm.
It's a good thing when somebody wants to take care of another person regardless. It's not something that's a debt that anyone owes anyone else. It's a kindness that should be appreciated and celebrated when somebody does it.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
if raising someone else's child is shameworthy, then how about shame the government for replacing fathers systematically?
There you go.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how about that?
Uncle Sam and the ultimate cuck.
Indeed. Crawl Dragon gives us $2 and says, home gay tests when?
I can think of a few ways to do that
Yeah.
don't involve any kind of chemistry. You might get poked, but
Yeah, just put a dick in your mouth, and if you like it, then congrats. If you don't,
If
then
I had a
congrats.
penny.
So anyway, yeah, we're going to go ahead and go to the after show. If you want to be a part of that, you have to be a badger or you have to be a patron. So either go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio or better still, go to feedthebadger.com, become a part of the, what are do badgers travel in herds? What is the word again? Is it a murder? Is it a pack? A swarm? Join the swarm. Join us in the swarm and join us on the Discord and be a part of the action. And, we'll have fun. We get to read lots of fun, great, informative, educational stories like this one about angry fat women that can't get laid. Or, I mean, they can get laid, but they can't find, regular boyfriends, even though they currently have one. And they don't really have anything to complain about. But don't let them stop you from, don't stop them from complaining anyway. So if you want to be a part of that, join us in the after show. Become a badger or become a patron at www.patreon.com/honeybadgerradio or feedthebadger.com. Also, give this video a like and a subscription. I see that there are a lot of people watching. That's great. So give us some likes, my dudes. Give us some likes. We love that. So with that said, this has been HBR News. And I want to thank you guys for coming and joining us. And I want to thank Mike and Hannah again for coming on with me. And we'll talk to you guys very soon. Have a lovely, lovely day.